Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Marvel Snap video. So it is that time of day again. We were just barely able to reach our next mystery card, so we're going to be able to pull a mystery card today. But before we pull the card, I want to thank everyone for all of your support on the last video. It's just been overwhelmingly positive. I also want to thank everyone that jumped in and joined our stream today. We had a really good and fun stream. We had some good chat going on. We drafted a couple of cool decks, and then we ended up actually bringing back the eye patch variant. So there will be a highlight video on the YouTube channel a little bit later, so keep an eye out for that. Or if you want to watch the video on demand, it is available over on twitch.tv/TLSGsnap. And so with those out of the way, let's go ahead and pull our mystery card. So we get Typhoid Mary. So Typhoid Mary is a really powerful, really high-powered 4-drop unit, but she has the ongoing ability of your other cards have -1 power. So she can become kind of difficult to use well. Maybe you play her and then follow up with like an Enchantress to block out that ongoing ability. So something that I think might be a decent combo is a Red Skull Typhoid Mary in the same lane. But then that's a lot of power, and you'd have to follow up with an Enchantress as well. And then we also have Zero, which is going to be able to remove the ability of the next card played. So we'd be able to drop that at the end of turn 3, on turn 4 or 5, or whenever works best. We could drop the Typhoid Mary, being a really high-powered 4-cost, but with a pretty impactful negative ability. And so this is a card I don't think I've actually ever seen played. I've seen Red Skull played before, but I don't think I've ever seen Typhoid Mary outside of a District X. So it's going to be interesting to kind of build a deck around here. I'm really excited. So let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so we are back with the deck that we drafted, and it on first glance it looks like it is going to be pretty patchwork, right? There's a lot. It's a very high mana curve. So turns 1, 2, and sometimes 3, you're likely not going to drop any cards at all. But where this deck list shines is going to be able to lock down a lot of locations. So we're seeing a lot of hold your cards until turn 3 when you can drop Nakia. So I don't think giving up the early game is going to hurt us as much as having a really sneaky late game. So this is going to be able to do a lot of really cool things. Like maybe you drop your Typhoid Mary into a lane on turn 4, you drop some cards on turn 5, maybe even a magic on turn 6 to extend the game, and then you sneak an Enchantress in onto your Typhoid Mary to cancel out the Typhoid Mary, and then giving all of the cards that you have on the board that extra 1 power buff back again. And then you can lock down a lane with the Storm Juggernaut combo. That way, even if you just barely lose that lane, on turn 6, you could always push a card over with Arnim Zola by destroying it in one lane, duplicating it in the other 2, which will be able to add cards into the flooded location after it's locked down. And then a lot of the rest of the deck is just about high power or tech cards to counter other cards that are in the game. So let's run through them really quickly. Zero is a 1-cost 3-power card that's going to act to remove the ability of the next card we play. This is going to be really good when used with Typhoid Mary or Red Skull to drop them without the downside of their ongoing abilities. Then we have the Storm Juggernaut combo, which Storm is going to act to change a lane and lock it down where the next turn is the last turn cards can be played. And then Juggernaut is going to push any cards played in that lane out. And so if we drop Storm, we can follow up with the Juggernaut to push and kind of lock down the lane so that they're not able to push the power that they thought they were going to in the lane. We have Maximus, which Maximus is a decent target for our Zero if we don't have any other options, or maybe we need to push out power quickly. But Maximus is a really high power 3-cost card with the drawback of on reveal your opponent draws 2 cards. So if you can either cancel this or your opponent has a full hand, then you can get the maximum upside of dropping Maximus without much downside at all. We have Shang-Chi and Enchantress. Both are tech or counter cards. So Shang-Chi is going to be able to destroy any cards at a location that have 9 or more power. So this can be a really sneaky last turn play to swing a lane in your favor where they may not be anticipating it. Then we have Enchantress. Not only can we use this in any lane that we want to remove the ongoing abilities in the enemy lane. So let's say they have an Iron Man and a Devil Dino in Onslaught Citadel. We can drop an Enchantress and basically swing that lane in our favor because we were able to remove those really big, impactful ongoing abilities. But we're also able to use this after we drop a Typhoid Mary or a Red Skull to remove their negative downside. So maybe we drop our Typhoid Mary and then we need to follow up with an Enchantress. Maybe we do the same thing. We drop a Red Skull and then we drop an Enchantress to help swing that lane in our favor when they thought they had it locked down. We have Iron Man, which is going to act to duplicate power. So let's say we use this with a Typhoid Mary. That -1 now becomes less impactful because we're able to double that power in that lane. Same thing with Red Skull, and then even more ideally, it would be an abilityless Red Skull, so that we can get the maximum upside out of it. We have Taskmaster, which Taskmaster is going to set that card's power equal to the power of the last card you played. So if we drop Red Skull and he's 14 power, we're going to be able to copy that 14 power without any of the downsides that Red Skull brings. We have Magic, so with a deck that has this high of a mana curve or an energy curve, we're going to want to extend the games more often than not to give ourselves an extra turn. Maybe we drop a 0 Red Skull on turn 6 and Arnim Zola on turn 7. Magic lets us extend the game to draw into our combo pieces and to give us an extra turn to kind of play around and use our combos where we need to. Then we have the big powerful Red Skull with ongoing enemy cards at this location have +2. If we can get around that downside, he is an incredibly strong card drop, only beaten by the Infinite and Destroyer. Then we have Arnim Zola. So Arnim Zola is going to act as more of a like coin flip. So if we need to push power into a lane that's already locked down via like flooding, or maybe it's a Sanctum Sanctorum, or maybe it's a kiln, something that locks us from playing cards there, this is going to let us push power over into those lanes. And ideally we would hit something like a zeroed out Red Skull, or a Taskmaster that copied a Red Skull, maybe even a Typhoid Mary, a Maximus to some degree. It lets us kind of push power into other lanes to kind of shift the game. It's one, hard to anticipate, and then two, it lets us kind of play into those lockdown locations to help us win those as well. And so that's the general idea of this deck list. I'm really excited to jump in and try it out, so we're going to jump into a few games. All right, so for our first game, we do draw into our Magic, so we're going to be able to extend the game. So that means on turn 6, we could do something like a 0 and a Red Skull, and then turn 7, we could do whatever lane we dropped Red Skull in, and we could kill it with an Arnim Zola to duplicate it in the other lanes to push some additional power that way. And so we're going to end up most of the time passing the first couple of turns here. So it should make for some pretty quick games. And then we do get the Storm Juggernaut combo here. So that's going to be a pretty important role in locking down a location for us. And so we're going to drop Storm into Los Diablos base. That way the flooded location doesn't accidentally get destroyed when Los Diablos base goes off. And so we're going to drop it here. That's going to give us initiation. We'll be able to follow up with our Juggernaut to push whatever they play there out, if they play something there. And then we do draw into our 0. So we will be able to either... Actually, I say we go ahead and play our 0 this turn, potentially here. And then we also we'll follow up with our Red Skull, and then we can do a Taskmaster on turn 6, and we may not have to extend the game if we don't want to. But it'll give us that option to decide. And so they do drop a card, but we, of course, push it out with Juggernaut. Just a beautiful combo. And if they had initiation, they would have been able to pull a card in anyways. But it being Strong Guy, I don't think would have done it for them. And so now this lane is locked down. Do we do our Red Skull here? So we could do our Red Skull here. Actually, no. I think we stack both of them in Wakanda, because that means it's going to protect them from being Shang-Chi'd. We won't have to worry about it. Or we could even do our Red Skull here. Next turn we can do Arnim Zola, so it'll push a 14 here and it'll push a 14 here. So it'll spread that power out across the board, and then if we do push a lane, we'll of course have a large enough win or deficit or difference between the scores in the flooded location. So they do Odin, or they do Blade into Ghost Rider into Odin, and then they discard. Not bad, not a bad play, but that drops a lot of their resources. And so they discarded, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it worked out very, very well that they had the Odin, which was then able to discard the Infinite, and it was just very fortunate for them. But they snapped. I think we're going to snap back here, because I am pretty confident. We're going to go ahead and we're going to destroy our Red Skull here with our Arnim Zola. That's going to push 14 power here and 14 power here. They're not going to be able to dump their hand here. They're not going to be able to move anything into the flood location. So what could they have? They could have a Chavez, which is going to make this 15. Adding 14 here, that's going to make it 17. It should swing it in our favor. I don't see them having anything else. Even an Iron Man wouldn't do it for them. I think we're pretty solid here. And so let's go ahead and let our Arnim Zola do work. And so they do have a Chavez. which was an 11 power Chavez, but that's not quite enough. So we're going to be able to get 17 power there. It's of course going to swing Baxter Building. We already have flooded lane locked down. Just being able to disperse that much power that quickly and kind of adjust. We don't have to fully commit to a lane. So that felt really, really good. And our first game out, we actually get an 8 cube victory to push us up to 104. So let's hope that this deck continues to shine like that, because that was an amazing. That was the first game that we have played after drafting this deck, and so it was still kind of in experimentation phase, but it feels, at least drawing the way that we drew that time, it feels really, really strong. So next up we have Golem. In our hand, we do have our Storm. We have our Enchantress, so if we want to drop like a Typhoid Mary and a Red Skull and then follow it up with an Enchantress, or maybe just one of the two, and then follow up with an Enchantress, maybe we can target a lane that they have an ongoing card so that we can really get a double whammy out of it. It's always a possibility, or that's what we should look out for. The second location turns this game into Limbo, so that works well for us, but we don't, and we want to drop something in the Storm lane, but we just don't have a good follow-up to this turn 3. So I think we drop our Storm into Xandar. We're going to leave Limbo as the empty location so that we can drop something like an Iron Man into an Arnim Zola, if that's the play line we go with. So we're going to leave it empty, at least for now. Ooh, and that's very, very unfortunate for us that they dropped a Sunspot. They just happened to drop a Sunspot right at the same location we dropped our flooding lane. So it's going to be able to be buffed up over time. So either we abandon that lane knowing that he's going to be able to pump out a lot of power, or we lean in, we play some power here, knowing that we'll be able to try and either push an Iron Man, a giant Red Skull, or something into the lane with Arnim Zola to potentially swing it for us. And so I think that's what we want to do. We are going to drop our Maximus here. So they have 6 cards in hand still. So if they don't drop anything here, then they actually don't get any upside out of the Maximus buff. If they drop only 1 card, then they're only going to draw 1 additional card from us playing Maximus, because they would have drawn that card naturally on the next turn anyways. So by capping out their hand, they're only getting the 1 additional draw here. They drop a Wave, and so we're able to do really any of our cards here, but I don't know where we want to play it necessarily. So I kind of want to play our Iron Man preemptively into Limbo. Next turn would be a prime target for a Shang-Chi into Monster Island, or maybe we just go with the regular Red Skull, knowing that we're not really necessarily competing for Limbo, but that would encourage them to drop resources there. We could follow it up next turn with a Taskmaster, a big 14 power Taskmaster here, and then on turn 6 we could either do like a Shang-Chi or an Iron Man here, or an Arnim Zola to push one of these high power cards out. And I think that gives us the most options in dropping our Red Skull here. And so they pull both of our cards out of the flooded location with Magneto. So Magneto being a really, really strong card for that Storm Juggernaut combo, in that it ends up pulling both of them out. So very, very nice. Very, very nice play there. So I think what we do here, so they have 21 power in this lane. Do we forego the Taskmaster here and leave it open for either a Shang-Chi to clear out the lane? I think we do it in that order. Or if we don't want to do a Shang-Chi, then we can do an Iron Man, which would also, I think, win us this location. We just have to worry about winning this one. And for turn 7, we'll be able to follow up with a Shang-Chi play or an Iron Man play with a 0 to pump a little bit of extra power, but it's not going to be anything huge. And so they discard a Hela. So they were running a Hela deck. And so they do have an Iron Man that's going to multiply their power. So now I'm torn. This is going to be a good target for an Enchantress, but then that would have to assume that they're only dropping resources into the Limbo location this turn. Or this is a good target for a Shang-Chi, but if they drop any more than 8 power into this lane, then they win. That's a very tough spot to be in, especially considering that they have so many resources here. So I think we anticipate. I think we play the anticipation game. So this would cause us to tie here. It would cause us to win this one by a lot. and therefore overcoming this. So the only way this works in this scenario is if they don't drop resources here, but since they were running a Hella deck, I anticipate that they have high power cards, and so maybe they're going to drop one of those high power cards, or maybe they drop 2 discard cards and they split their power, but I think we play the gamble here and expect them. We got the right read, guys, which of course stops our Red Skull. It stops their Iron Man. That gives us a big enough lead in Limbo. Oh, never mind. Yeah, no, it gives us a big enough lead in Limbo that the Tide left Monster Island is enough, and we have a big enough deficit between our lane, our Limbo lane victory, and the Flooded lane that we end up winning. That could that read saved us. We very well could have lost that, but reading what they were anticipating playing, and what I did was I put myself in their shoes. They had these 2 already won, and so for us to win the game, we would have to at least flip one and retain the other. The most logical play would be to flip the one that we already have, and then we would have to flip 2, which would be really, really hard, being that this is a flooded location. And so I'm just glad that we ended up getting the read correct. That felt very, very satisfying. That win, even though it was only 2 cubes, probably one of the most satisfying 2-cube games that we've ever had. So next up we have Morbin on you. We have Kiln as our first location, which becomes locked down after turn 4. And so I think Arnim Zola would be pretty big here. I think we're going to drop our 0 early, and then we could follow it up with a Maximus into Kiln to try and lock that one down outside of having to push power. I think we'll be able to push power over there with like an Arnim Zola, but relying on that feels like a recipe for disaster. All right, so they don't drop anything this turn. So we're going to be able to follow up with an abilityless Maximus here. And then we can also, if we wanted to, on turn 4, we can follow up in the same lane with a Juggernaut. That would push any resources that they're trying to play there out. And so if we don't drop Juggernaut there, I anticipate holding him for the entire game. Because once a location is locked down, dropping him can potentially push resources over there that could swing it for him. So it becomes a gamble at that point. It becomes a coin flip, a 50-50 between which location you push the card into. So we do have a Maximus here, which is going to bring us up to 10. And they have a Morbius. So they discarded their Hella. We're going to go ahead, knowing that we just ran a Hella deck. We're going to go we're going to go ahead and snap that advantage to lock down the lane. We don't want to give them any time to kind of get back into the game without any risk. So we want to make them commit early if they're going to want to try and keep playing. All right, so next up we have Fuzzy 18, a fellow infinite rank. We have Kiln as the first location again. What are the odds that we get it back to back? And so they drop in a Koye. We don't have anything great to drop on any of the turns just yet. So maybe we go with like a weird Maximus and Typhoid Mary in the same lane, and get the downside from that. It feels kind of bad. And I don't think we do the Maximus here. I think that feels too bad. And then with that being said, the Typhoid Mary feels difficult as well. So we're going to push whatever card they drop here out. Ooh, and they give us the Wave. So we're going to be able to drop any card that we want into Kiln this turn. And so with our Arnim Zola, we know that we're going to be able to drop him. I would say Iron Man, but ongoing effects are doubled here, so we would kind of want him to be in one of those locations. So what do we think about actually doing our Maximus here? And then -1 power, is that a big deal when we have 14 that are going to be doubled by our Iron Man? Do we do a Typhoid Mary here? So Typhoid Mary, next turn we do Red Skull here. Then we do, oh wait, that's turn 5 and then turn 6. So that's frustrating, or that's tough. So they copy our Typhoid Mary, and so now all of their cards are going to have -1 power. So definitely not what they were wanting to happen there. And so here we're going to have to do I would like to have Iron Man on the board, but it just becomes a little too difficult to make that happen on turn 5 into turn 6. Unless we do something like, oh no, we'd still lose this lane. I was going to say we could do Iron Man this turn and then 0 Red Skull next turn. So I think what we have to do is we do a Red Skull. Let's go ahead and do it into the lane that they have resources. And then we're going to do, which is very dangerous here. Is it better to do a weaker combo here and do the 0 Maximus, and then we can just duplicate the 7 power instead? I think so. I think the double ongoing downside from Red Skull would be too much to overcome. And so I don't think that's the play that we wanted to go with. I think this gives us a better chance at having a decent power level on the board at the end of the game. And so we do have our Maximus. We're going to drop our Arnim Zola, which is going to then send 6 more power here to win this location. It all comes down to if they drop more than 6 power in this location, which is very likely. I don't think this was the best play line. I think the Typhoid Mary getting duplicated helped, but I think with that being the kiln location, it kind of forces us into playing a certain way. Ooh, and so they drop a resource into Onslaught Citadel. So maybe they were trying to compete with us in Onslaught Citadel and didn't think that we were going... There's absolutely no way that worked. And so their thought process was, we had resources into Onslaught Citadel. All they had to do was push that advantage further to keep it out of our way, because in their eyes they had kiln locked down. So luckily they dropped their big unit of death into the Onslaught Citadel. We were able to sneak out the win. So we do have the Typhoid Mary, Taskmaster, Enchantress play line, or even the Shang-Chi play line here. And so depending on what else we draw into, we'll determine how we let this unfold. Like a 0. Oh boy, that's not how we wanted it to unfold at all. Oh, okay. Could be better, but it could also be worse. And so we do draw into our 0. I almost want to bait them into a snap though. And so if we drop our Typhoid Mary and then act like we forgot that it's going to make our Shang-Chi over here -1, we can then do like an ARG, we can do the emote, really play into it, follow it up on turn 5 with a Taskmaster here, and then follow it up on turn 6 with an Enchantress to push that lane out. I don't know if that's how this plays down. In my head, that's how this play line goes down. So we're going to start with a Juggernaut to kind of fend off any resources they wanted to drop into Muir Island to give us a little bit more advantage there. And so they go with an Electro. So Electro being a ramp card that we don't have yet. And on reveal, you get +1 max energy, but after that, the ongoing effect is that you can only play 1 card a turn. So very, very interesting card there. Oh, so maybe we don't even have to Taskmaster here. We're going to be able to do our Arnim Zola, or our Typhoid Mary. We can do a Red Skull in the same lane and then just really play into the fact that we forgot that this was locked down. And so let's be stunned for a second. Is that ample time to be stunned? And we go, we forgot. We forgot, how could we? And then we follow it up with a Red Skull. And we are stacking a lot of resources here. So do we ever want to do this instead? That would give us the lead here. No, because it's going to give them +2 each. And so that would bring them up to 11. So we still have the lead for now, but that may convince them to kind of split the resources. And so if they have a Shang-Chi, maybe we don't lose outright. I think we do that. And then we have to go with the Enchantress here on turn 6. Like that, we've written ourselves into that play line here. And so they do go with Odin here. And so if they have a Shang-Chi, that's the Red Skull is gonna make us a little competitive here. And I think, actually thinking about it, because we want this gap or this deficit to be as small as possible, it would have made more sense to play him here. But I think it adds a little bit of confusion at the very least. So if we drop our Enchantress here, that's gonna give us 1 extra power in these 3 to cut the lead here, to tie again here. And so I think that's what we go with. And they're not going to want to Shang-Chi our Typhoid Mary. because it would push this back up to a tie. And so we should be a rogue. I think that's our next main character. We're just a rogue. So they Shang-Chi Kunlun, which feels kind of bad because they were already getting an extra 6 power, so it cut 6 power that they had. And because we enchantress this lane, it of course bumps us back up. We get the buffs from Weir Island. We tie this lane again. It's working as designed, but it just feels so dirty. This definitely feels very roguelike. It's very sneaky, where you're not going to know what they're playing or what they're intending until that very last turn. So for our next game, we have Safety Blade, and we draw into the Superflow, which is going to let us pump out and ramp into cards a little bit earlier. Ooh, and they have this Swarm deck, so it doesn't help them as much as it helps us, seeing that we have a lot of high power cards. Ooh, and we drag a card onto the board, and that could have been worse. It could have been a 0 or an Arnim Zola, but we do change the location to Limbo, so they know now that we are planning on doing extending the game. Do we play our Juggernaut here to try and push power from them over into the Superflow so they lose the advantage? I don't think we do, because it would buff up their Angela before. Actually, no, it wouldn't. But I'd rather try to push it from over here. And I don't think they're going to drop anything there this turn. So I think we sit back and we wait. Ooh, so they did drop something there this turn. So had we dropped it into the unknown, we could have pushed Nakia somewhere, either here to block off their chance at buffing Angela, or over here to block off the Superflow. And so here, I think we're just going to drop the Juggernaut. And then we're not going to drop 0 because we don't have any good target for 0 here. We're dropping Juggernaut into Nidavellir, hoping that they drop some resources there, hoping that we can... Wow, they dropped a lot of resources there. So then they drop Electra, which we're going to push somewhere. Okay, so it gives them one less card to buff up their Angela. We have to be aware that they could potentially end the game at the end of turn 5, or at the end of turn 6, by dropping a Scarlet Witch, by moving Nightcrawler out and dropping a Scarlet Witch here. So we want to try and be at least competitive prior to that point, so that we can stay competitive here. I think what we do is we drop our Iron Man here. We will probably end up changing the Superflow at some point with our Storm, but I think the best use of our Iron Man here is going to be into Nidavellir, because that's going to keep him below the Shang-Chi level and still keep a lot of power output there. So they do move their Nightcrawler already, which is interesting that they would move it so quickly. But I do think we need to anticipate the potential Scarlet Witch play, and so we get additional power from our Storm, or from the Superflow, but we don't have any really good high power cards to bounce off of them at this point. And so, I mean, we could Taskmaster, which would copy the Iron Man. We could do a 0, but then the next card's ability wouldn't trigger. How do we play this? So I do want to drop 0 here. I think we do a Storm here and then a 0, so that we can at least tie this location, and it would force them to, if they're going to drop a Scarlet Witch here, it would force them to invest those resources accordingly. It would be a little bit more difficult. We would at least have this lane pushed, but then the Scarlet Witch is going to push it up over anyways. So the last card we played was our Red Skull. They do have this location currently. So how much do we anticipate them changing this location for this turn? If so, they win here. If they change it this turn, they win. And even if we dropped, let's say, Arnim Zola and it hit Iron Man, we can't because we used 0, which does feel unfortunate. So I think that they changed this location, but playing as if they didn't, or they weren't going to. I think we play into the flooding location. That way next turn we could do a Taskmaster here to swing both locations. We could even do a Taskmaster here, but let's go ahead and let it play out. Ooh, they don't change it, do they? Okay. Surprising. I was fully bought into the fact that they had Scarlet Witch there. And so with our Red Skull as it is, even with their buffed up strong guy, it is not enough to push them up over that limit. And so this being turn 7, we can either copy our Red Skull. We could Shang-Chi their Ant-Man and their Nightcrawler here, which would leave them with 13 power, which is going to be 26 power. We would win here, but do we win by more than if we had done a 14, which then becomes 19, 27, becomes 50 something. And so I think at that point it becomes difficult or impossible to win, really. And so it would end up being a Taskmaster here if that's what we wanted to do. But I think we have to go with the Shang-Chi, which destroys several of their cards. We still get the buff here. Doesn't feel great because they snapped. So if they have something really large or if it pumps out power over, we are going to snap back though. But if what they drop here pumps power over into the flooded location, then they're going to sneak it out. I think because they snapped, they have like a Chavez, a Ricky Raccoon. I know his name's Rocket, but I like him as Ricky Raccoon. So we do destroy their Ant-Man and their other card here. That is going to give us a approximately 20 point win in the right-hand side, which is enough to win us the lane, and we win the flooded by 1, which is enough to win us the game. And so we are going to end the video here after that one. We had a lot of really good 8-cube games. This deck list, it did end up losing, I think it was about 4 games, and we won 6. So not as good of a ratio as our normal decks, but the games that we won were either 4-cube or 8-cube games because the opponent was like, they don't know what they're doing. They're running a terrible deck, and it was really hard to place and anticipate what we were going to play. It's really hard to anticipate an Arnim Zola. It's hard to anticipate a Taskmaster or an Enchantress into your Typhoid Mary to then boost up your locked down Professor X lane. It becomes really difficult to read at that point. And so this deck list performed fairly well. We climbed from 103 up to 105. And in just about 10 games, so pretty good performance so far. We didn't get as much usage out of Typhoid Mary as I would have liked. At 4 power, she seems to be an awkward fit. So with the Storm Juggernaut combo, it makes it a little difficult for us to consistently drop the Typhoid Mary on turn 4, or even do like a 0 from turn 3 into the Typhoid Mary. And then we could do a Taskmaster. We could utilize her, and so I think she has some uses. I just think we drew into our higher power combos in like the Red Skull, Arnim Zola, the Iron Man. I think we drew into some of our more powerful combos, but I do think if there is a list that she fits into right now, I think this is it. I think this is as close as we get to a good Typhoid Mary list for the time being. And so I am going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like down below. It helps the video get discovered. It helps us know that you enjoyed the content. And then if you did really like it, potentially leave a comment down below. I love interacting with you guys, so it may take me a little bit of time to respond, but I will always respond to as many of the comments as I can. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.